I see people trickling in. Hi, Mark. Good evening, fellow Toastmasters and guests. Jim Squires is a longtime Toastmaster from Glendive, Montana. His adult journey included graduating from the University of Montana, 2 years of community development work in Brazil, where he met and married Creza. That union is blessed with 2 sons, 6 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandsons. Jim was a latecomer to Toastmasters, but has benefited from all he learned in a variety of public speaking positions: community college board chair, a director of Montana Wheat and Barley Commission, no-till farm advocate, advisor to the Montana Extension Service, and the Montana Experiment Stations. Jim speaks Portuguese on a daily basis and has presented short talks in 2 other languages. Please help me welcome Jim Squires with How to Get Ideas.
Thank you, Wendy. Good evening, all. This is quite a privilege to be able to do this. I want to bring up a PowerPoint here. So let me go to share screen and bring up this. And we'll start here. Let me get to my, let me back up, or let me proceed here forward just for a little bit. Oh, wait a minute here, I'm in the wrong place. What's an idea? An idea is this. It's illustrated by a Charles Schulz cartoon with Charlie Brown, Snoopy, Linus, Schroeder, the piano player, and Lucy Van Pelt, and of course, Snoopy the dog. What is asked is, what is an idea? And in exuberance, Charlie Brown answers, I know the answer. The answer lies within the heart of all mankind. What? The answer is 12. Oh, looking dismayed, Charlie says, I think I'm in the wrong building. I'm admitting people here as well as that are coming in. Now, having then this scenario where Charlie Brown has been asked this question, what is an idea? And responding and finding out he's completely wrong. What is an idea? It's a thought, an impression, an inspiration, a suggestion, a concept, a plan of action, a theory. Now, have you ever felt at times that it is so obvious that after someone tells you about it, you wonder, why didn't I think of that myself? Let me get another person to admit it here. Consider the wisdom of Mark Twain. Mark Twain said, I was gratified to be able to answer promptly, and I said, I don't know. Well, most definitions then are more descriptions than they are definitions. James Webb Young gives this one. An idea is nothing more or less than a new combination of old elements. Hang on to that thought, a new combination of old elements. Now that we know what an idea is, we must devise a plan for getting them. Well, fortunately, several methods have been devised, and better yet, these methods are quite similar. And here's one in a book entitled A Technique for Producing Ideas. James Webb Young produced this 5-step method. The mind must gather its raw materials. The mind then goes through a process of masticating those materials. If you're not acquainted with the word masticating, it's the word for chew in most languages, but it is an English word. And then thirdly, you drop the whole subject, put the problem out of your mind as completely as you can, out of nowhere, and nowhere will be your subconscious. The idea will appear. You take your little newborn idea out into the world of reality and you see how it fares. Now, a fellow by the name of Hermann von Helmholtz used 3 steps to get new thoughts. So this is another type of approach. He used preparation, the time during which he investigated the problem in all directions. He used incubation, when he didn't think consciously about the problem at all. And then finally, he identified illumination, when happy ideas come unexpectedly, without effort, like an inspiration. Now, Moshe Rubinstein says that there are 4 distinct stages to problem solving. His was preparation. You go over the elements of the problem, you study their relationships. Then incubation. Unless you've been able to solve the problem quickly, you sleep on it. Now, you may be frustrated at this stage because you haven't been able to find an answer and you don't see how you're going to find an answer. And then inspiration. You feel a spark of excitement as a solution or a possible path to one suddenly appears. Then there's the 4th step of verification. You check the solution to see if it really works. Now, there's a book entitled In the Predator of the Universe, The Human Mind, written by Charles Wakefield. And in that book, he says that there are a series of 5 mental stages that identify the creative act. Well, first is the awareness of the problem. Second becomes defining the problem, and then comes as a saturation in the problem and the factual data surrounding it. And fourth comes the period of incubation and surface calm. And then 5th comes that explosion, the mental insight, the sudden leap beyond logic, beyond the usual stepping stones to normal solutions. Now, none of these approaches talks much about the condition your mind must be in to climb these steps. So we're going to talk about some mind conditioning. If you are not in condition, it doesn't make any difference if you know the steps. You'll never get the ideas that you're capable of getting. Now, the rest of our talk will be related to what you see on screen. The next 10 chapters in the book are 10 ways to idea condition your mind. So we're going to be doing setting some stages and scenarios to help you see and come up with ideas. The first of those is to have fun. Now, under having fun, let me refer to my notes that I have off screen. People having fun are more creative and they are idea prone. The best ads, TV commercials, and billboards were generated by teams having the most fun. After judging several speech contests, I believe this to be true in Toastmasters as well. There's an interesting quote by a fellow by the name of Roger von Eck. He stated, "Necessity may be the mother of invention, but play is certainly the father. Think about that. Necessity is the mother of invention, but play is certainly the father. Another thought by a gentleman by the name of Paul Valéry is serious people have few ideas. People with ideas are never serious. According to another author, Isaac Asimov, a scientist, he said, the most exciting phrase you hear in science is not eureka, but that's funny. It should not surprise us that humor and creativity are bedfellows. The author of the book that we're reviewing, How to Get Ideas, Jack Foster, tells a story of how colleagues dressed when he was started working. Men always wore business suits and ties. Women wore dresses or suits. In the late 1960s, that changed. It changed to much more casual, with being more casual with sweaters, blue jeans, t-shirts, tennis shoes. Jack was actually interviewed by the Los Angeles Times, and he was quoted as saying, "I don't care if they come to work in their pajamas as long as they get the work out." The next day, after the article appeared in the paper, his entire department showed up in their pajamas. It was great fun. The office rocked with laughter, but people were having fun and the work got better. Tom Peters said, the number one premise in business is that it need not be boring or dull. It ought to be fun. If it's not fun, you're wasting your life. Don't waste your life, have some fun. And incidentally, come up with some ideas as well. The second of the ideas that on how to condition your mind is be more like a child. Jack Foster tells a story of, let's skip ahead here. Charles Baudelaire said that if you can revisit the wonder of childhood, you can taste genius. An adult thinks too much, has too much scar tissue, is manacled by too much knowledge and too many boundaries, too many rules, too many assumptions, and too many preconceptions. There's an interesting book entitled The Wu Li Masters. A gentleman by the name of Gary Zukav wrote, those who have felt most the exhilaration of the creative process are those who best slip the bonds of the known and venture far into the unexplored territory which lies beyond the barriers of the obvious. That person has two characteristics. First characteristic is a childlike ability to see the world as it is, and not as it appears according to what we know about it. There's a story that Jack relates about a Zen master, gentleman in Japan by the name of Nan-in. There was a university professor who asked to visit with Nan-in, and he wanted to inquire about Zen. As Nan-in served tea, he poured the cup full, and then he kept on pouring. The professor, unable to restrain himself, interrupted, saying, "It's over full. No more will go in." And to that, Nan-in said, like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? Wow, the takeaway here is our cup is usually filled to the brim with the obvious, with common sense, and the self-evident from our own experience. Are we still willing to listen? Interesting comment. To children, there is no last time. Every time is the first time. When they go exploring for ideas, they explore a land that is fresh and original, without rules, a land without borders or fences or walls or boundaries, a land of infinite promise and opportunity. Children don't have blockages because they don't know about before. Think about that. They don't know about before. They don't have preconceived notion and a world of experiences as we older ones do. They break the rules because they don't know that rules exist. They constantly see new relationships among seemingly unrelated ideas and things. They study ordinary things intently with a sense of wonder. Carl Sagan said it this way: kids are natural-born scientists. They ask deep scientific questions. Why is the moon round? Why is the sky blue? What's a dream? There's a takeaway here. Let the child in you come out. Don't be afraid of letting that happen. Next time you have a problem or you're trying to find an idea, ask yourself, how would I solve this if I were 6? Or how would I look at this if I were only 4? The third in this list of ideas conditioning attitudes is become idea prone. Read, explore, particularly do some crossover training. Do you know somebody who is accident prone? I would venture to say that you have children, or you have brothers or sisters or children. We need to know that ideas exist. In 1931, a man by the name of Lincoln Steffens wrote, "Nothing is done. Everything in the world remains to be done or done over." Wow. I remember Darren LaCroix, the world champion of public speaking, said, "Great speeches are never written. They're all rewritten." Leonard Cohen, the person who composed the beautiful song Hallelujah, had 80 versions of that song. The greatest pictures are not yet painted. The greatest play has yet to be written. The greatest poem is still unsung. Now, question to all of us as Toastmasters. Have you ever had your mind go blank after you prepared a speech? You practiced your speech, you read through it several times, and you started doubting yourself. You got to wondering if you were as good as you thought you were. Your body and mind lowered your performance level to where you were comfortable again. No amount of effort or practice or determination could bring you back to where you were. Point: your self-image determines what you are and how you perform. Not effort, nor your will, but your self-image. So the takeaway here is the only way to significantly improve your performance is to improve your self-image. You must accept that what you think about yourself is the most important factor in your success. Your personality, your actions, how you get along with others, how you perform at work, your feelings, your beliefs, your dedication, your aspirations, even your talents and abilities are controlled by your self-image. Act like the person you want to be. It really is as simple as that. Act like the person you want to be. If you think of yourself as a failure, it's likely that you will fail. 2,000 years ago, in fact, it's over 2,000 years ago, Virgil said, they can do it all because they think they can. Henry Ford had an interesting quote along this line. He said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Those who think they can. Those who think they can't. It really is as simple as that. William James observed the greatest discovery of his generation is the fact that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes. Jesus said, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. If you think you can't think differently, you're wrong. So the takeaway here is you can think differently. You have a choice. The mind can change the mind. Start by altering yourself, your self-image. Now, computers, faxes, modems, the internet, we're all supposed to make our lives simpler. And we would have more time to come up with ideas. Well, basically the opposite happened. Electronics stole the time that efficiencies created. Now we have less time to do twice as much. My son Daniel is an officer with the Orthofix company, a bone healing company in Texas, actually stationed formerly out of Sicily and London. And it was a European-based company with major interests here in the United States. Over a period of number of years, my son worked from Australia to Tuscany and all over Europe, and did a lot of traveling. When COVID came along, it changed all that. And we know how it has impacted our Toastmasters clubs. He didn't even go to the office anymore. And for over a year, nearly 2 years, he worked from a laptop in his bedroom. And he was dealing with people. About 7 different languages were being spoken. All conversations were in English, but nonetheless, he was able to accomplish that without leaving that bedroom and that laptop computer. The number 4 on our list here, I'm going to run tight on time, so I'm going to have to move ahead. You need to visualize success. I want you to visualize this. Suppose there's a 12-inch wide span, steel span, flat steel span, going across 40 stories high between skyscrapers. I'll give you $100 if you'll walk it. Got any volunteers? I don't think so. What if I raised the ante to $500? Any takers? I don't think so. But now let's change the scenario. Someone has kidnapped your son, and they're dangling him upside down, standing on the end of that beam, and it's 40 stories straight down. You know what? I think you'll find a way to walk that beam. That second scenario, you didn't think about all of the details and the risks. You just want to save your baby, and you will find a way to do that. The next one is rejoice in failure. Wow. There are 5 reasons you should make failure your friend. I'll have to go through these rather quickly. One quote is this: the only way you know that you've gone too far is by going too far. And going too far is called failing. When you outrun your headlights, you know you've outrun your headlights. Someone said, you don't know you have succeeded until you fail. And what he meant was, you don't know if any idea is as good until you have something to compare it to. Put a positive spin on things when they don't work. Like Edison and the light bulb. who found 10,000 ways that it didn't work. Believe that every step brings you one step closer to success. If you fail, it changes your mindset. The way you look at life. Failing can make you fearless. But again, we have a choice here. It can set you free. There's a sense of freedom that comes from making choices. Don't hide your failures. Wear them with pride. Revel in them. Sometimes you know your ideas sound. It'll work if given a chance. What you've done is right. If so, use failure as a motivation to keep on trying. The term "I will show them" is a powerful vehicle. Ride it. The fellow who invented the Xerox copy machine tried for 17 years to get companies interested in a photocopy device. 17 years. J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of The Lord of the Rings, was a single mom on welfare because before she became one of Britain's wealthiest citizens. Jack Foster worked with hundreds of creative people in his career and noted two things about them. This is idea number 6. Get more inputs. Use this tactic of what if to generate more thought. The two things that he noted about creative people was they were courageous and they were extremely curious. They had almost insatiable curiosity about the things, how things work, where things come from, and what makes people tick. It stands to reason that a person who knows more old elements is more likely to come up with a new idea than a person who holds fewer old elements. If you don't have a natural curiosity that forces you to accumulate bits of knowledge, you must force yourself. I'm going to suggest that there's different ways to get out of a rut. There was a gentleman by the name of Ray Bradbury. He read at least one short story every day. He read an essay and a poem virtually every day. He said he would never knew when something he read 20 years ago would collide with something he read yesterday to produce an idea for a story. So there are two ways to force yourself to get more old elements. Get out of your rut. Every day your senses are recording the same sights, feelings, smells, sounds, and tastes. You know what? There's a gentleman in Los Angeles who worked there for 12 years. For 12 years, he never went the same route to work. Every day he went to work, he drove a different route. He found things in eastern Los Angeles that he didn't know existed. There's another way that we can focus and force yourself to find old elements. Jack Foster tells a story about, as a child, when his family traveled, they would go from the state of Washington, clear back over to Indiana. You know, that must be 1,800 miles, something like that, or even more perhaps. They did a little thing they called white horse. So the kids in the back seat and the parents all were watching to see if they noticed a white horse. And the first person to note white horse or shout white horse and point toward it, they counted that. And they kept track of that. And eventually you found a winner. When they played that game, they saw all kinds of white horses. But when they didn't play the game, they rarely saw a white horse. Wow. How come we only see a fraction of what we see? Well, the cover of the book, that How to Get Ideas, can't quite get a good picture there, but it shows a gentleman in a small skiff fishing. And there are 4 schools of fish deep in the water. and he's fishing, and each of these schools of fish looks like a light bulb. Obviously, an idea and a light bulb we associate there. They're different shapes, different sizes. But this gentleman is fishing with a bare hook. And I had several questions, and I was going to ask these, but I don't have time to do this exercise this way. But he's in this skiff, and it has a rudder on it. And he is bare-chested. He doesn't have a shirt on. I was going to ask you, what color was the shirt on the gentleman, the fisherman there? What were the means of locomotion for the skiff? Were they paddles? How many fish did you see? How many different schools of fish? How many types of fish did you see? We'll have to let this one pass. Now, it's important that we discover the magic of seeing. He and a friend, Jack and a friend, for a number of years, when they were about 18, 19 years old, would go into a bar, and they were underage. They knew it. And they would first come in, and before they were served, they would take 10 minutes to look at the scenario in the bar. And then they would close their eyes. One of them would close their eyes and say, how many cash registers are behind the counter? How many pictures are on the wall? And whose picture is closest to us? How many tables are set up in here? And then the other one, after a number of questions, the other one would do the same. And they would obviously pick different thoughts or different perspectives from that room. They then trained themselves to be more perceptive. That is truly a skill, and it's a skill that we really, truly need to develop. See more of what you're looking at. But it's something you have to work at every day. Now, number 7 on our list is this. Screw up your courage. Leave your comfort zone. Wow. How can you be courageous? You know, an idea is a pretty delicate thing. It can be killed by a sneer or even a yawn. It can be stabbed to death by a quip and worried to death by a frown on the right man's brow. That's why so many are so bereft of ideas. The fear of rejection shuts down their idea factories. There are a number of things that can help us push ahead at this point. The first is to realize that everybody is afraid. Really, everybody. You know, it takes courage to speak out. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's going ahead in spite of the danger, and despite of being afraid or feeling despair. You know what? If you speak up, you're going to find out that those who sneer or quip or afraid are in fact afraid of you. They are afraid of your ideas. So next time, fight your way through fears and blurt out your idea, if for no other reason to make the other guy afraid. Second point in this area is there are no bad ideas. Madame Curie had a bad idea, and that turned out to be radium. Richard Drew had a bad eye, and that turned out to be Scotch tape. Joseph Priestley invented carbonated water while he was trying to invent the chemistry of air. Blaise Pascal invented roulette while he was experimenting with perpetual motion. Alexander Graham Bell was trying to invent a hearing aid when he invented the telephone. Charles Goodyear discovered vulcanized rubber entirely by accident. The list of inventions is still growing, and we all know that it was Christopher Columbus who discovered America. Another point in this area of things that threaten us, you can always get a better idea, another idea, probably even a better one than you had before. The fourth one here is nobody is ever criticized for getting too many ideas. Don't place all your dreams on one idea. Come up with lots of ideas. You'll be known as that genius with all of the ideas instead of that jerk with the lousy idea. Creative achievement is the boldest initiative of the mind, according to Robert Goudin. It is an adventure that takes its hero simultaneously to the rim of knowledge and the limits of propriety. Swing for the fences, go for broke. Number 8 in our list here, team up with energy. Now, there are some jobs that are best done alone. But when you're trying to get an eye, it often helps to do it with a friend. Ideas surface faster with a couple people working together rather than alone. Remember this, though, too many friends rot the party. Try brainstorming with at most 3 or 4 people, and actually brainstorming with just 2 of you is best. Often you're reluctant to say the wild, far out, stupid, unworkable idea that actually might trigger a great idea, especially in front of your boss. There's a story told about a company that was very successful in developing managers. But the problem with their success in their management approach was that every one of those people who graduated from that class was hired away from the company. In absolute frustration, the CEO of the company shouted out, "We ought to cut off their legs." And somebody thought about that for a bit and said, "Well, why don't we hire all wheelchair managers?" And they widened the doors, they put in ramps, and they retained their graduates. Wow, that's off the wall. Now, there are different ways of thinking. This is number 9. We need to rethink our thinking. Many of the most creative minds in histories thought with pictures rather than words. Temple Grandin is a name well known in agricultural circles. Here was a person as a child who was autistic, and doctors encouraged her mother to put her into an insane asylum, that child was incapable of learning. Well, Temple Grandin went on to earn her PhD, and she is responsible for the design of almost every livestock handling chute or system in the United States. She lives down in Colorado. There's a wonderful film about her. Oh my goodness. Another thing in this idea of thinking, rethinking your thinking, is think laterally. It's most likely you were brought up to think linearly or vertically, to think logically from one point to the next until we get to some kind of a sound conclusion. Such thinking is analytical, sequential, purposeful. If something doesn't make sense, we stop and go in another direction, taking one logical step after another until we reach a sound conclusion. In lateral thinking, you make jumps. You don't have to follow a logical path. You can step sideways, or you can go down alternate roads that seemingly don't lead anywhere. All good solutions do make sense and thus have logical pathways to them. Most solutions are obvious in hindsight, and it's difficult to imagine some solutions being arrived at logically. Don't assume boundaries that aren't there. Many times your thinking is inhibited because you unconsciously assume boundaries and limitations and constraints when in fact they aren't there. An example of this is, let me skip ahead. But you need to set some limits. I just mentioned imaginary boundaries. Now we need to have a framework within which to work at finding a solution. When the painting is too large, we won't really get started. But if we have a deadline, a boundary and time, you know what? We'll come up with a solution in appropriate time. Leonardo da Vinci, the painter, said, "Small rooms discipline the mind, whereas large rooms distract." Isn't that true of a Toastmaster meeting or any meeting, a public meeting? If we have a small group, we can have more engagement and so on. And finally, the last of the 10 is this. If a new idea is nothing more or less than a new combination of old elements that we arrived at the beginning of this, it stands to reason that the person who knows how to combine old elements is more likely to come up with a new idea than a person who doesn't know how to combine old elements. So it's taking those old elements, relying on experience, experiencing things, taking a different route to work, seeing things from a different perspective. The task that I normally use, but for lack of time this go around, I'm going to ask you, what is half of 13? Somebody give me, unmute and tell me, what is half of 13? Anyone?
6.5. 6.5.
6.5. Any other guess? You're exactly correct. It's 6.5. How did you come to that conclusion? You learned that in your elementary mathematics. You learned to divide. We learned counting, and then we learned addition, and then we learned subtraction and division. Oh my, and then we learned some of the other rules related to mathematics. But what if 13 was not a number, it was just an object? What is half of 13 if it's just an object?
A 1 and a 3.
It's a 1 and a 3. Okay, now let's change perspective. You are an accountant for Caesar Augustus in Rome back in the around the 1st century. And you are looking at Roman numerals. X, I would be 13. What's half of XIII?
Aye.
II and XI. Okay, that's not so bad, but you divided it vertically. What if we divide it horizontally? Now what do we got?
VIII.
VIII, that would be 8. And then we would have a caret, what we would normally use as an exponent sign, caret III to the 3rd power. Wow. Now, having thought of that, what if it's not in English? What if it's dreizehn or trece or tres or trece in Spanish? What if it's in another language that we may not speak? Is it still 13? Well, but we don't comprehend it. Now, can you imagine then why Charlie Brown said, the answer is 12, I must be in the wrong room? Fellow Toastmasters.
At this time, we will open for a few questions. If you have a question, you may type it in the chat or raise your hand to be called upon. It's a fairly small group, so it's okay if you speak out. I have a burning question. Jim, as a polyglot, what language do you get your ideas in?
I actually think in several languages. I'm trying to stop my share screen, but I can't get my, here we go. Let me get my thing over here and stop share. Obviously, English is my first language. Portuguese is a very close second. I do a lot of thinking in both Spanish and French, and I read German, but I am not fluent. I don't speak German, and it's just something that I have used as a mental exercise and a memorization technique. And so I will find myself during the discourse, find myself translating into Portuguese or another language just in order to retain that. And I find that I'm plowing new ground and I don't get distracted as easily when I'm really focused like that in memory and translating in my mind. Any other questions?
Laura,
What was the original inspiration for you to seek out this book? Were you trying to accomplish a particular goal?
No, I was asked several years ago in an interview what books I had read that made me who I am today. And I ended up, there was one list was published in a Montana publication. Another time I was on a flight to Orlando, Florida. And I was seated next to a young couple who I happened to be reading Stephen King's The Eighth Habit on the plane. And we got into it and he says, have you read this book, or how much of this book have you read? And I said, well, I've only got about the first 5 chapters in. And she says, do you like to read? And I said, actually, then I referred to the list of books that I had put together and for the other interview that I had done. And I've done that actually 3 different times. I met a Brazilian doctor in Minot, North Dakota at the Pea and Lentil Association meeting. And he had 3 teenagers at home. They spoke Portuguese at home, living in Michigan, and they didn't have a television set. And every week, every child, mom and dad, all gave a book report. And Kellogg, the cereal company, actually had an in-house reading list. He shared that with us, and then I shared mine with him. And so I have found that there are a number of just wonderful sources of reading books on best-selling type books or motivational books. And that's kind of my line, is motivational books, adventure books. I'm not a voracious reader. My sister is. I've had cataract surgery in the last year, and that really did curtail a lot of my reading. So, but I put together reading lists, and they've been published in the past. I haven't had one published for probably 15 years now, so I'm kind of out of that circle, but it was a great experience and quite a nice thing to be asked that. Anything else? I've been talking nonstop for about 45 minutes. So with that, thank you for stepping in and listening to my audience. I believe that Laura has posted, did you post in chat the PDF file, or yes, the whole PowerPoint is in a PDF format, and I intended to post that, but I've been a little bit too busy to handle that. So if you would post that, that would be great, Laura.
Sure, I will be glad to.
Anyway, thank you for being the audience that you are.
well, thank you everyone for attending tonight's educational sessions. Don't forget, we have additional activities coming up tomorrow. And this evening, we have our hospitality room. Please join Laura at 9 o'clock Mountain Time, 10 o'clock Central, for the Night Owl Hospitality Talent Show. And please join me in giving Jim a warm round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.